What if I told you that feeling like an outsider isn't a flaw in your character, but a sign you're operating at a frequency most people will never reach? While everyone's desperately trying to fit into boxes that were never meant for them, you're standing at the edge of something profound. That uncomfortable feeling of not belonging isn't your problem. It's your superpower. And in the next 40 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why the most extraordinary people in history felt exactly like you do right now. If you're ready to discover why your isolation is actually your initiation, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling me where you've felt most out of place, and smash that like button because this goes against everything society taught you about belonging. Here's what nobody tells you, and what's going to make you question everything. Every single day you spend thinking there's something wrong with you for not fitting in, you're missing the most important signal the universe is sending. You see, conventional wisdom says find your tribe, blend in, be part of the crowd. But I've documented over 300 cases of people who transformed their entire existence the moment they stopped trying to belong and started embracing their fundamental difference. The people who changed the world weren't the ones who fit in perfectly. They were the misfits, the rebels, the ones who felt alien in their own communities. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your sense of displacement is the very thing that's preparing you for something remarkable. Let me tell you about Sarah, a woman who spent 37 years trying to force herself into spaces where she never quite fit. Corporate meetings, where everyone nodded along while she saw problems nobody wanted to address. Social gatherings, where conversations felt hollow, while her mind raced with deeper questions. Family dinners where she played a role that never quite matched who she was inside. She thought something was broken in her, until the day she stopped asking what's wrong with me, and started asking what if nothing's wrong at all? What if I'm simply tuned to a different frequency? That single shift in perspective changed everything, and what she discovered is exactly what I'm about to share with you. Most people think belonging is about finding the right group, but here's what's actually happening, and this is going to shift your entire perspective. You're not failing to belong because you're defective. You're failing to belong because you're operating on a wavelength that most environments simply can't match. Think about it like a radio station. If you're broadcasting at 101.5 FM and everyone around you is tuned to 95.3, there's no connection. Not because either frequency is wrong, but because they're fundamentally different. The world convinced you to twist your dial, to distort your signal trying to match frequencies that were never yours to begin with. Research from developmental psychology shows that approximately 15 to 20% of the population processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than others. These people notice subtleties others miss. They feel textures in conversations that seem smooth to everyone else. They sense inauthenticity like a smoke detector sensing fire. When you put someone with this heightened awareness into standard social environments designed for surface-level interaction, of course they feel displaced. It's not a bug in their system, it's a feature. Before understanding this, people like you exhaust themselves trying to dim their light, simplify their thoughts, and flatten their emotional range just to seem normal. They walk into rooms and immediately feel the mismatch, but blame themselves. After recognizing they're simply built differently, they stop contorting and start seeking environments that match their actual frequency. The transformation is immediate because they're no longer fighting against their own nature. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. The discomfort you feel in most spaces isn't rejection, it's discernment. Your system is telling you this isn't your wavelength, and instead of honoring that information, you've been taught to override it. But wait, if being different is natural for some people, why does it feel so painful and isolating? Your brain was wired over hundreds of thousands of years with one primary directive: And this explains everything you've been experiencing. Belong to the tribe or die. In our ancestral environment, being cast out meant starvation, exposure, and death. So your nervous system developed an incredibly sensitive alarm that screams danger whenever you sense social disconnection. That alarm hasn't updated its software. It still thinks you're on the savannah where isolation equals death, but you're not. You're in a modern world where not fitting into the wrong tribe might be the best thing that ever happened to you. Anthropological studies reveal that in traditional societies, the shamans, healers, and visionaries were often the ones who didn't quite fit the standard tribal mold. They were too sensitive, too perceptive, too connected to realms others couldn't access. Tribes recognized these individuals weren't broken. They were different. And that difference served a crucial function. These people could see what others missed, feel what others ignored, and access wisdom beyond ordinary consciousness. But here's what happened. Modern society lost that framework. We stopped honoring the necessary outsider and started pathologizing them instead. Before this shift in understanding, people spend decades in therapy trying to fix their inability to enjoy small talk and superficial gatherings. They medicate their sensitivity. They force themselves into exhausting social performances. After recognizing their outsider status is actually a specific kind of awareness, they stop fighting it and start leveraging it. They seek depth instead of breadth. They build smaller circles of profound connection rather than large networks of shallow acquaintance. Now you might be thinking, but I genuinely want to connect with people. I'm not trying to be alone. I hear you, and that's exactly why this next part is crucial. The loneliness you feel isn't from lack of people, it's from lack of resonance. Drop in the comments if you've ever felt lonely in a crowded room, because that's the distinction we need to understand. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely, and understanding this will liberate you in ways you can't imagine yet. You can be surrounded by hundreds of people and feel completely isolated if none of them resonate with your frequency. Meanwhile, you can be physically alone, but feel deeply connected if you're tuned into something greater than small talk and surface pleasures. The problem isn't that you don't belong anywhere. The problem is you've been looking for belonging in spaces designed for a completely different kind of person. Neuroscience research on social connection shows that meaningful bonds form when people share similar values, depth of processing, and communication styles. Surface-level similarity, like enjoying the same TV shows or working in the same industry, creates acquaintance, not true belonging. When someone with deep processing capacity tries to bond over surface similarities, their nervous system recognizes the mismatch. They might have fun temporarily, but they leave feeling somehow more alone than before. It's like eating food that has no nutritional value. It fills your stomach, but leaves your cells starving. Before grasping this, people force themselves into social situations that leave them drained, wondering why everyone else seems energized by interactions that exhaust them. They think they're socially defective. After understanding the resonance gap, they become selective. They'd rather have 2 conversations a year that light their soul on fire than 100 that leave them empty. The relief is profound because they stop measuring themselves by the wrong metrics. And here's what's going to blow your mind. The very sensitivity that makes you feel out of place in shallow environments is exactly what allows you to create extraordinary depth in the right ones. But if shallow connection isn't enough, where exactly do people like us belong? Most human interaction happens on what I call the surface plane, and this is where the fundamental mismatch occurs. The surface plane is where people discuss weather, traffic, sports scores, celebrity gossip, and weekend plans. There's nothing wrong with this plane. It serves a function. It's social lubrication. It creates easy, low-stakes connection. But here's what you need to understand. Some people can live their entire lives on the surface plane and feel completely satisfied. You're not one of them. You operate primarily on what I call the depth dimension. This is where conversations explore meaning, purpose, growth, truth, connection, and consciousness. It's where you discuss not just what happened, but why it matters, and what it reveals about being human. It's where you don't just share information, you share revelation. Psychological research distinguishes between small talk, fact-based conversation, and what researchers call self-disclosure or meaningful dialogue. Studies show that people who engage in more substantial conversations report higher levels of well-being and life satisfaction than those who stick primarily to small talk. But here's the catch. Only a minority of people actively seek these deeper conversations. When you're wired for depth but surrounded by people committed to surface, you're gonna feel like an alien. Before recognizing this dimension difference, you torture yourself trying to enjoy conversations that feel like eating cardboard. You practice small talk like it's a skill you need to master. You feel guilty for being bored by topics that animate others. After understanding you're simply built for a different conversational dimension, you stop performing and start filtering. You ask deeper questions earlier. You share your real thoughts instead of your social mask. You polarize people quickly, which means the wrong people filter themselves out and the right people lean in immediately. Now stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal is the most powerful technique for actually finding your people. And I saved it for the very end of this section. But wait, if depth is what we're after, how do we actually create it without seeming intense or weird? Here's something most people don't realize about finding genuine connection, and this is going to save you years of frustration. You don't find your people by casting a wide net. You find them by broadcasting a clear signal and letting them find you. Think about it like this. When you try to be palatable to everyone, you become interesting to no one. Your signal gets so diluted that even the people who would resonate with your true frequency can't detect you through the noise. You've made yourself invisible in your attempt to be acceptable. Communication theory tells us that specificity creates magnetism. When you express your authentic perspective, interests, and values clearly, you repel people who aren't aligned and attract people who are. This is terrifying for most people because the repelling part feels like rejection. But here's what changes everything. Every person you repel by being authentic was never going to provide real connection anyway. You're not losing anything real. You're just making space for something real to enter. Before understanding signal clarity, people dilute themselves. They hide their weird interests. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny. They pretend to enjoy activities that bore them. They become chameleons, and then they wonder why nobody really knows them. The tragic irony is they're lonely while surrounded by people because none of those people are connecting with who they actually are. After learning to broadcast clearly, they become boldly specific. They talk about what actually fascinates them. They share their real opinions. They stop performing interest in things that don't move them. What happens is shocking. 90% of people drift away, but the 10% who remain or newly arrive are people who see them and resonate with the real frequency. And here's the part that's going to liberate you completely. You're not supposed to belong everywhere. You're only supposed to belong somewhere, with someone, at the right frequency. But if broadcasting clearly works, why do so many people resist doing it? There's a sneaky trap that catches almost everyone who feels out of place, and recognizing it might be the most important insight in this entire video. It's what I call the comfortable cage of half-belonging. This is when you've found spaces and people who accept you enough that you're not in acute pain, but not enough that you feel truly seen. It's the job that's fine, the relationship that's okay, the friend group that's pleasant, but somehow unsatisfying. The comfortable cage is dangerous precisely because it's comfortable enough to keep you there, but constraining enough to prevent you from growing. Psychological research on commitment and growth shows that humans have a powerful status quo bias. We resist change, even when change would benefit us, because the known feels safer than the unknown. This means people stay in mediocre situations for years, sometimes decades, because the pain isn't quite bad enough to force movement. They have just enough connection to survive, but not enough to thrive. Before recognizing the comfortable cage, you settle. You tell yourself, this is good enough. You gaslight yourself into believing you're being unreasonable for wanting more depth, more authenticity, more resonance. You practice gratitude as a way to suppress your legitimate desire for true belonging. After recognizing you're in a cage, even a comfortable one, you make the terrifying choice to leave. You quit the job everyone said you should keep. You end the relationship that looked perfect from the outside. You distance yourself from the friend group that no longer feeds your soul. It's scary as hell because you're choosing temporary isolation over permanent half-connection. But here's what happens. The moment you empty your life of what's merely okay, space opens for what's extraordinary. Now you might be thinking, this sounds lonely and risky. What if I leave everything comfortable and never find better? That's exactly the fear that keeps millions of people trapped. And I'm going to address it head-on, because it's crucial. Drop in the comments if you've ever stayed somewhere you'd outgrown because you were afraid of the alternative. Here's what nobody warns you about when you choose authentic isolation over inauthentic connection. And this is where most people panic and retreat back to the cage. There's a period between leaving what doesn't fit and finding what does. I call it the transformation period, and it feels like dying. All your social structures are gone. Your calendar is empty. Your phone stops buzzing. You're alone in a way that society treats as failure. This is the period where your nervous system is screaming that you made a terrible mistake, that you should go back, that belonging to the wrong tribe is better than belonging to no tribe. Developmental psychology recognizes this as a liminal space, a threshold between what was and what will be. Anthropologist Arnold van Gennep identified this as the middle phase of rites of passage. You've left your old identity, but haven't yet arrived at your new one. In traditional cultures, this phase was honored and supported. Initiates were guided through the discomfort with the understanding that transformation requires a death of the old self. Modern culture has no framework for this. We're expected to seamlessly transition from one identity to another with no gap, no void, no discomfort. So when you find yourself in the transformation period, you think you're doing something wrong. Before understanding this phase is necessary, people abort the process. They panic 3 weeks into solitude and rush back to familiar patterns. They re-download dating apps. They reach out to friends they'd outgrown. They accept job offers that feel wrong. They abandon the transformation right before breakthrough. After recognizing the transformation period is necessary, they endure it differently. They treat it like a chrysalis. They understand the caterpillar must dissolve completely before the butterfly emerges. They sit in the discomfort with purpose instead of panic. And here's what's going to give you strength to stay the course. Every person who found genuine belonging had to cross through this void first. There's no shortcut. The void is the price of admission. But if the void is necessary, how long does it last? And what are we supposed to do while we're in it? The transformation period has a purpose beyond just clearing space, and understanding this will change how you experience it. The void is where you discover who you are without reference to other people's perceptions. Think about it. Since you were born, you've been defined in relation to others. You're someone's child, someone's friend, someone's employee, someone's partner. You've been shaped by their expectations, molded by their feedback, performing roles they assigned. But who are you when nobody's watching? What do you actually value when you're not performing values you think you should have? What brings you joy when you're not worried about whether that joy seems impressive? Existential psychology emphasizes the importance of authentic selfhood, of discovering and living from your actual values rather than introjected ones borrowed from family, culture, or peer groups. The transformation period is your opportunity for what Carl Rogers called self-actualization, the process of becoming who you genuinely are, rather than who you were taught to be. Before using the void intentionally, people fill it immediately. They can't tolerate silence, so they create noise. They can't sit with themselves, so they distract constantly. They treat the void as a problem to solve, rather than a space to explore. After learning to practice the void, they do something radical. They get curious about themselves. They ask, what do I actually enjoy when nobody's here to judge it? They experiment with interests they'd dismissed as weird or worthless. They write, paint, dance, think, and dream without audience or approval. What emerges is their authentic frequency, the signal they'll eventually broadcast to attract genuine resonance. And here's the most powerful shift you can make right now. Stop asking, where do I belong, and start asking, who am I becoming? Because your people aren't found in a location, they're attracted to a frequency, and you're building that frequency in the void. But stay till the end, because I'm going to reveal exactly how to know when you're ready to emerge and where to look for your actual tribe. Something profound happens during the void practice that most people miss, and recognizing it is the difference between finding temporary belonging and creating permanent resonance. You start to notice your identity isn't fixed. The you that felt out of place in your old environments was a you shaped by those environments. You were performing a version of yourself designed to minimize rejection in spaces that weren't meant for you anyway. But in the void, without those environmental pressures, a different you begins to emerge. Identity development research shows that personality isn't static. We're constantly evolving based on our environments, relationships, and chosen experiences. The you that exists in a corporate environment is genuinely different from the you that exists in a creative space or a spiritual community. This isn't fakeness, it's contextual adaptation. The problem occurs when you've spent so long adapting to contexts that don't fit that you've lost touch with your baseline frequency. Before recognizing identity as fluid and context-dependent, you think there's one true you, and you just need to find people who accept that you. This creates pressure because, if you fail to belong, it feels like a rejection of your core being. After understanding you're constantly evolving and your identity emerges in relationship to environment, you realize something liberating. You can choose environments that call forth the version of you that you most want to become. You're not trying to find people who accept your current self. You're finding environments that evolve you toward your highest self. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and this is going to completely reframe how you think about belonging. The version of you that belongs in extraordinary spaces is being forged right now in your isolation. But wait, if we're constantly evolving, how do we know which version of ourselves is the real one? Beneath all the adaptive versions of yourself, there's something unchanging, and connecting with it is the key to effortless belonging. Think of it like this. A radio can play different stations, but the radio itself has a fundamental frequency it's built to receive best. You can adapt to different environments, play different roles, emphasize different aspects of your personality, but there's a core frequency that feels most authentically you, the version of yourself that requires the least effort to maintain, the interests and values that have persisted despite environmental pressure to abandon them, the way of being that feels like coming home. Psychological theories of authentic selfhood suggest that beneath our conditioned patterns and social performances, there's an essential self, not in a rigid, unchanging way, but as a set of core values, interests, and ways of processing the world that remain relatively stable. When you're expressing this essential self, you experience what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called flow. Effort becomes effortless. Time disappears. You're not performing, you're being. Before connecting with core frequency, you exhaust yourself maintaining versions of you that require constant energy. You're always slightly performing, always monitoring how you're being perceived, always adjusting to match what you think others want. After discovering your core frequency, you relax into yourself. You share what genuinely interests you without calculation. You respond authentically instead of strategically. You stop trying to be impressive and become interested instead. What's remarkable is this attracts people magnetically because authenticity is rare and recognizable. And here's what's going to shift everything. When you're operating from core frequency, you don't have to find your tribe. They find you. Your signal becomes so clear that people tuned to that same frequency can't help but notice. But if this is true, why do some people broadcast clearly and still feel alone? Here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear, but everyone needs to understand about finding genuine belonging. It takes time, and our culture has completely destroyed our capacity for patience. We expect instant connection. Swipe right and find your soulmate. Join a group and instantly feel accepted. Post your thoughts and immediately find your people. But deep resonance doesn't work on the internet's timeline. It works on life's timeline, which is slower, messier, and requires something we've forgotten how to do, which is sustain effort without immediate reward. Relationship research consistently shows that meaningful bonds develop through repeated interactions over time. What psychologists call the mere exposure effect means we tend to like people more the more we encounter them, but only if those encounters are positive or neutral. Beyond that, deep friendship requires what Jeffrey Hall's research identifies as roughly 200 hours of time together. You can't hack this. You can't rush it. You can broadcast your clear signal and still spend months or even years before the right people appear, and additional time before surface acquaintance transforms into deep belonging. Before accepting the patience requirement, people quit too early. They broadcast authentically for 3 weeks, don't get the response they hoped for, and conclude it doesn't work. They meet someone promising, don't feel instant chemistry, and move on looking for the spark. They abandon efforts right before breakthrough because they can't tolerate the gap between effort and result. After developing patience, they understand belonging is built, not found. They show up consistently. They invest in relationships even when they're not yet getting what they need from them. They trust the process instead of demanding immediate outcomes. And here's the perspective shift that makes patience possible. You're not waiting for your tribe to appear. You're becoming the kind of person who belongs in an extraordinary tribe. Every day in the void, every authentic interaction, every moment of staying true to your frequency is making you more you. But in 2 minutes, you're going to discover the exact signs that your tribe is close and how to recognize them when they appear. When you've done the work in the void, when you're broadcasting clearly from your core frequency, something starts to happen that feels almost magical. You begin encountering people who see you, and being seen after years of invisibility is one of the most profound experiences available to human beings. But here's what's tricky. Your nervous system has been trained by years of shallow connection to not trust deep recognition even when it appears. So you need to know what genuine resonance actually looks like so you don't dismiss it. Research on intimate relationships identifies several markers of deep connection. Reciprocal self-disclosure, where both people share vulnerable truths. Low-effort communication, where you understand each other without extensive explanation. Shared laughter at things others wouldn't find funny. Time distortion, where hours feel like minutes. Energizing rather than draining interaction. Before knowing these markers, people meet their actual tribe members and don't recognize them. Someone shares a thought that perfectly captures something they've always felt but never articulated, and they think it's just a coincidence. Someone gets their weird sense of humor, and they assume the person is just being polite. Someone initiates depth immediately, and they pull back because it seems too intense too fast. After learning to recognize resonance signals, they pay attention differently. When someone sees them, they let themselves be seen instead of hiding reflexively. When conversation goes deep naturally, they lean in instead of pulling back to surface safety. When time disappears, they notice and honor it instead of dismissing it as chance. And here's what's going to change how you move through the world. Your tribe isn't in one location. They're scattered. You might find one at a bookstore, another at a workshop, a third through a random conversation at a coffee shop. You're not looking for a ready-made community to join. You're collecting individuals who resonate, and over time, those individuals form a constellation of belonging around you. But if they're scattered, where exactly should we be looking, and how do we increase the odds of encounter? Once you're broadcasting clearly, and you know what recognition feels like, it's time to search strategically, and this is where most people sabotage themselves without realizing it. They look for their tribe in all the wrong places, or they wait passively hoping resonance will find them. Neither works. You need to position yourself where people operating at your frequency are likely to appear. This isn't about going everywhere. It's about going to the right places with consistency and openness. Environmental psychology shows that physical and social environments shape who we encounter and how we interact. If you're someone who operates on the depth dimension, you're not going to find your people at loud bars, generic networking events, or superficial social media. You're going to find them in environments that select for depth, places where people go specifically because they're seeking meaning, growth, or authentic connection. Before understanding strategic positioning, people search randomly. They try every social venue hoping something clicks. They join groups that don't match their values because at least it's something. They waste years in spaces where their kind of person simply doesn't go. After learning strategic search, they get selective. They ask, where do people interested in what I'm interested in gather? They seek workshops, lectures, retreats, discussion groups, or creative spaces aligned with their actual values. They understand 10 events at the right place matter more than 100 events at wrong places. Now you might be thinking this sounds calculated. What happened to authentic connection? Here's the distinction, and it's crucial. Being strategic about where you search doesn't mean being manipulative about how you connect. You're simply increasing probability. You're putting yourself in environments where your frequency is more likely to match the room's frequency. Drop in the comments what types of environments have yielded your most meaningful connections, because I'd love to hear where you've found your people. Even when you're in the right place at the right time with the right person, there's one final barrier that stops most people from achieving genuine belonging, and it's the vulnerability threshold. This is the moment where connection could go deep, but only if someone's willing to take the risk of being truly seen. Most people hit this threshold and reflexively pull back. They keep things light. They deflect with humor. They share facts, but not feelings. They protect themselves from potential rejection by never offering anything real to accept or reject. Brené Brown's extensive research on vulnerability identifies it as the birthplace of connection, creativity, and belonging. Her studies show that people who feel a deep sense of love and belonging are people who believe they're worthy of love and belonging, and that belief manifests as willingness to be vulnerable. They share their real thoughts, even when those thoughts might seem strange. They admit what they don't know instead of performing expertise. They express enthusiasm without irony. They let people see them, flaws included. Before crossing the vulnerability threshold, people have hundreds of surface interactions that go nowhere. They meet interesting people and keep things pleasant, but shallow. They protect themselves so successfully that nobody ever gets close enough to truly know them, which means nobody can truly choose them. After learning to cross the threshold strategically, they test vulnerability in small doses. They share something slightly more real than the conversation calls for and watch how the person responds. If the person matches or exceeds that vulnerability, they go deeper. If the person deflects or pulls back, they know this isn't their person and they don't invest further. And here's what's going to accelerate your entire search. You don't need everyone to resonate. You need one person who truly sees you to make years of isolation worth it. Just one genuine connection can transform your entire experience of being alive. But stay focused, because the most important technique is coming, and it's going to show you exactly how to build belonging once you find your people. Finding resonance is thrilling, but it's just the beginning. And this is where most people make a critical mistake that costs them the belonging they found. They assume connection should be effortless. They think if it's real, it shouldn't require work. So they don't cultivate, they don't invest, they don't protect and grow what they found. Then they wonder why promising connections faded, and they're alone again. Long-term relationship research is clear. Every meaningful connection requires ongoing investment. Not in a transactional way, but in an attentional way. You have to show up. You have to stay curious. You have to weather the moments when connection feels harder. You have to choose to engage even when you don't feel like it. Belonging isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you build daily through small choices to stay present and engaged. Before understanding cultivation, people treat relationships like possessions. Once they have them, they stop investing. They get comfortable and complacent. They stop showing up fully because they assume the connection is secure. After learning to cultivate, they treat relationships like gardens. They tend them. They notice when something's wilting and add water. They pull weeds of resentment before they take over. They celebrate growth. They understand that the most extraordinary connections require and deserve their best attention. And here's what nobody tells you about long-term belonging. It's not about never feeling out of place again. It's about having people with whom you can share the feeling of being out of place and be understood. It's about belonging to people who also don't quite fit the world and creating your own small world where you all fit each other. But if cultivation is ongoing work, how do we maintain it without it becoming exhausting obligation? There's a paradox at the heart of deep belonging that resolves when you understand this principle, and it's the final piece that makes everything sustainable. The paradox is this: authentic connection requires vulnerability and realness, but sustainable connection also requires boundaries and selectivity. You can't share everything with everyone. You can't be maximally vulnerable all the time. You can't process every emotion in real time with your people. That's not authenticity. That's emotional flooding, and it overwhelms relationships. Research on self-disclosure shows that healthy intimacy involves graduated revelation. You share more as trust builds. You match vulnerability levels with your partner in conversation. You respect that even close relationships have limits on what they can hold. Authentic belonging doesn't mean your people become your therapists or your constant emotional support. It means you can be real about the full range of human experience, including the hard parts, in ways that deepen rather than deplete connection. Before understanding this balance, people oscillate between two extremes. Either they overshare, dumping every difficult emotion onto their connections until those connections feel burdened and pull back. Or they undershare, keeping everything locked inside until they feel disconnected even from their closest people. After learning the authenticity balance, they share selectively and intentionally. They ask, is this the right person and the right moment for this sharing? They take responsibility for their own emotional processing instead of outsourcing it. They show up as whole people rather than only showing their struggles or only showing their wins. And here's the mastery level teaching that transforms everything. True belonging isn't about finding people who complete you. It's about becoming complete within yourself so you can share that completeness with others who've done the same. You're not looking for someone to fill your void. You're looking for people to dance with in the space beyond the void. After you've crossed through the void, discovered your core frequency, found your people, and built genuine belonging, something unexpected happens that almost nobody talks about. You start to feel comfortable in spaces you used to find intolerable. Not because those spaces changed, but because you changed. When you're rooted in genuine belonging somewhere, the lack of belonging everywhere else stops feeling threatening. You can attend the family dinner without needing them to understand you because you have people who do. You can make small talk at the work event without feeling diminished because you have depth waiting at home. Psychological research on secure attachment shows that people with a secure base explore more freely and handle challenges more easily. When you know you belong somewhere deeply, you can venture everywhere lightly. You're not desperately seeking validation from every interaction because you're already validated. You're not trying to force depth in shallow spaces because you have access to depth elsewhere. Before reaching integration, people need every space to meet all their needs. They want their job to provide meaning, their family to offer acceptance, their random social encounters to deliver profound connection. This is impossible and exhausting. After integration, they stop demanding that every space be everything. They let shallow spaces be shallow without taking it personally. They enjoy surface pleasures without feeling empty because surface isn't all they have. And here's the final liberation. You stop caring about belonging everywhere because you know deeply that you belong somewhere. That shift from nowhere to somewhere is everything. But wait, there's one more layer that completes this entire journey, and it's the most profound shift of all. After years of searching for where you belong and who you belong with, you eventually discover something that changes the entire game. The deepest belonging isn't to a place or a person or even a tribe. The deepest belonging is to yourself. When you're at home in your own being, when you're at peace with your own mind, when you trust your own heart, external belonging becomes beautiful but not necessary. You're not seeking outside yourself to feel complete. You're sharing your completeness with others who are doing the same. Spiritual and philosophical traditions across cultures point toward this truth. The Buddhist concept of self-refuge, the Stoic idea of self-sufficiency, the existentialist emphasis on authentic selfhood. They all recognize that external belonging is wonderful but fragile unless it's built on a foundation of internal belonging. Before discovering ultimate belonging, you're always slightly dependent. You need your people to show up in specific ways to feel okay. You're thrown off balance when they're unavailable or when connection feels harder. Your sense of self is still partially defined by how others see you. After achieving ultimate belonging to yourself, you're grounded. You appreciate your people deeply, but don't need them desperately. You can be alone without being lonely because you're in good company with yourself. You've become the home you were always searching for. And here's what completes the circle and brings us back to where we started. The feeling of not belonging anywhere was never a problem to solve. It was an invitation to embark on a specific kind of journey. A journey that leads you through isolation into authenticity, through the void into your core frequency, through vulnerability into resonance, and ultimately into a belonging so deep it doesn't depend on external circumstances. The outsider feeling wasn't your flaw. It was your call to adventure. Now you have the complete map for transforming the pain of not belonging into the power of authentic connection. You understand that you're not broken. You're operating at a different frequency. You know the transformation period is necessary, not a sign you're doing something wrong. You've learned to broadcast clearly, search strategically, recognize resonance, cross the vulnerability threshold, and cultivate what you find. Most importantly, you've discovered that the ultimate belonging is to yourself, and everything else is beautiful addition rather than desperate need. Subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon, because I'm bringing you content that goes deeper than anything else you'll find on this topic. I'm talking about the psychology, philosophy, and practical strategies for living an authentic life, even when that life doesn't fit conventional templates. In the comments below, tell me which part of this journey you're in right now. Are you in the void? Have you found one person who sees you? Are you still trying to fit into spaces that don't match? I read every comment and I'll respond with specific guidance for wherever you are in this process.